Not ready. We're ready whenever it is. You're going to wait? Okay.
He just wants to get approved. He doesn't want to comply with the green bus traffic stuff. So that's the issue the patient is.
You ready? Okay. Call the meeting to order. Bob, is there any change to the agenda?
You just adopt the agenda at your desk.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Motion second, adopt the agenda. All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Need approval of the minutes from August 8, 2013. If there's any changes or additions at this time, I need to hear them. Got a motion second to approve the minutes of August 8, 2013. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and those minutes are now official. Recognize council members, and we've got a new one sitting at the end with us. That'll be taking the position from the council. Councilman Hunt, welcome. Anything you want to say? I'll give you normally 2 minutes. I'll just give you a minute today. You're not officially here.
I'm just going to sit in.
Turn on your mic. Hit the black button there.
I'm just going to sit here and listen, take notes from Bill Cleveland.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Baker, would you like to speak at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm here to speak on the property at 5516 Kentucky Avenue, which is currently commercial right now, and Mr. Cherry is wanting to get it rezoned R6 residential. And I've been to 3 meetings at the Nation's Neighborhood Association on this, and all 3 meetings were pretty much split. And Mr. Cherry had a petition go around the neighborhood, got over 100 signatures on it, and people in favor of getting it rezoned R6, where you could build 2 houses on this lot. There was a single-family home on it. It was torn down in 2004, and this property has been an eyesore ever since, with vagrants hanging out on the lot, drinking beer and breaking beer bottles and leaving trash on the property and everything. So I'm in favor of getting it rezoned R6. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilman? Councilman Grier, you wanted to wait? Okay. Bob, items for deferral, do we have any?
Yes, there are several items for deferral. First one is item number 1A, 2013Z028PR-001 on page 4 of your agenda. This is a request to rezone from MUG, CS, CL, OR20, RS5, R6, OL, SP, RS10, and RS7.5 to MUGA, MULA, and OR20A zoning for various properties and a portion of property located along Gallatin Avenue, Gallatin Pike, and Main Street. And staff's recommendation is to defer this item to the September 26, 2013 Planning Commission meeting. And the next item for deferral is 1B. This is the Gallatin Pike UDO. This is a request to apply the Gallatin Pike Urban Design Overlay District to various properties and a portion of property located along Gallatin Avenue, Gallatin Pike, and Main Street. Staff recommendation is to defer to the September 26, 2013 Planning Commission meeting as well.
Okay, Bob, let me interrupt you. That's going to be deferred to September 25th, but I think we have a work session on September the 11th at 2:30.
The next commission meeting would be September 12th, I believe, Thursday at 2:30. The work session would be in this room.
Okay, if it's September the 25th, wouldn't that be on, what is the next meeting date in September? Is it the 11th or the 12th?
The next meeting is September 12th.
12th. So this deferred to September 25th or 26th?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
26.
Yes, the meeting, these will be deferred to September 26th.
Okay. But we have a work session on September the 12th at 2:30 with this commission then
Correct.
to talk about that. Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And the last item for deferral is 2013 S 121-001, the Kenner Manor land re-subdivision. This is a request for final plat approval to create 3 lots on property located at 4006 Woodmont Boulevard. Staff recommends deferral to the September 12th, 2013 meeting.
Okay.
And
So if I'm correct, we've had deferral for items 1A, 1B, and item 9.
correct.
Okay. Item 2 is not,
There is one withdrawal also.
Okay.
That item number 2 is the Abbott Martin Estates lots 1 and 2 amendment. This is a request to amend the recorded plat to permit duplexes on properties located at 2311 and 2313 Warfield Lane. Those properties are zoned R20, and the applicant has requested a withdrawal of that application, so staff is recommending withdrawal of that.
but are we going to hear item 2 today? Is that,
No, I'm sorry, item 2 is the Abbott Martin
Withdrawn,
Estates,
okay.
and that is, the applicant has requested that one be withdrawn, and so that staff is also recommending that, so that will not be heard.
clarify that? Okay.
And just to also clarify for the commission, staff had recommended items 3A and 3B be deferred. The applicant has requested that to be heard. We requested that to be deferred to hear the Green Hills traffic study, but it'll be on, we still recommended deferral, but we didn't put it on the deferred agenda. We left it on the regular agenda.
Is the applicant here for item 3? And you want that to be heard, not deferred? Okay. Okay, you've heard the items to be withdrawn or deferred. Is there a motion to accept?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, items on consent.
Before I get to the consent, as information for our audience, if you are not satisfied with a decision made by the Planning Commission today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the Planning Commission's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact independent legal counsel. As noticed to the public, items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. So as I read these next cases into the consent agenda, on the consent agenda into the record, please raise your hand if you'd like it removed from the consent agenda. The first item is item number 4, 2013Z-012TX-001. This is a request to amend the Metropolitan Zoning Code pertaining to adjustments to build-to zone requirements, and staff recommends approval.
Staff, we've got some minor changes to that. We'd like to defer that one meeting.
Okay. Item number 6.
We're sorry, Doug has been working on that, and he noticed some changes on that, and we just...
Okay, go ahead with
Okay.
the consent, but I'm going to go back and take that one.
Okay, so that one would be
separate
taken off
vote
the
on it.
consent agenda. Item number 6, the McRedmond Center Planned Unit Development. This is a request to revise the preliminary plan and for final approval for the McRedmond Center Planned Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 709 Old Hickory Boulevard, Zone CL, to permit the development of a 8,940 square foot retail building. Staff recommends approval with conditions. Item number 7 is the Lakeside Meadows Phase 3 subdivision plat. This is a request to grant a variance to the subdivision regulations to permit the extension of an approved concept plan for 2 years for Lakeside Meadows Phase 3 for 63 single-family clustered residential lots located at 4652 Hesse Road and 3547 Earhart Road, zoned RS15. Staff recommendation is to approve the extension of the concept plan approval to August 22nd, 2015, and there's a memo at your desk on that. There was a typo in the staff report. It said August 22nd, 2014. That should have been August, to extend it to August 22nd, 2015. The next item on the consent agenda is item number 8. This is the Christiansted Valley Reserve development. This is a request for development plan approval to create 22 single-family lots on property located at 265 Holt Hills Road. Property is zoned RS15, and staff recommends approval with conditions. And under other business, item number 10, there's a new employee contract for Jason April, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Bob. This is item number 4, has been requested to be deferred, so let's take that separate as a motion to defer item number 4. Motion second to defer. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carry. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Just to note, that's to defer one meeting.
Okay. Items on consent are items number 6, 7, 8, and 10. There's a motion to approve those on consent agenda. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? The letters that were on our desk, I've got 7 or 8 copies of the same letter. I didn't know if they weren't collated, or I've got one, and then I've got 8 letters from Elizabeth McKenzie.
We do.
Okay, everybody does.
Is that, can staff clarify that?
The packet that we received at our desk has one letter regarding Kentucky Avenue rezoning, and then 7 or 8 of the same letter regarding the Green Hills project from Elizabeth McKenzie. It's duplicates of the same. Are we missing other correspondence? Do you know?
Were there other letters on the Kentucky Avenue other than the one?
It's actually like 14 of the same letter, since it's double-sided.
We'll double check before that case comes up, and the Kentucky one and the Green Hills. We'll double check and let you know.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, I'm Catherine Withers. I'll be presenting for Cindy Wood, who could not be here today. Items 3A and 3B are related. However, staff would like to present item 3A and then hold the public hearing and vote before the presentation for 3B because of the larger issues involving the Green Hills area plan. This request is to change the community plan policy from residential low-medium to residential medium density. The applicant requested property is the three parcels outlined in red and comprises 1.1 acres, and staff enlarged the area to be studied to the area circled in yellow, 9.47 acres. A community meeting was held by the Planning Department on August 1st and was attended by approximately 75 people. The property is located on Lone Oak Road, opposite with the intersection of Shackelford Road. To the west is Hillsborough Road, and the Green Hills Mall is in the upper left-hand corner of this image. This area is a transition between the higher intensity associated with the Green Hills Regional Activity Center and the established residential neighborhoods to the east and south. The staff recommendation is to defer to November 14th to consider this application with a request to adopt the Green Hills area transportation plans in order to address mobility issues in the area. Staff will discuss the Green Hills area transportation plan and how it affects this application and the larger Green Hills community and why a deferral is necessary. The property is zoned R10, which allows single-family and duplexes on 10,000 square foot lots. There is an established pattern of duplexes, single-family houses, and even a 4-unit structure directly north of the applicant's property. The amendment area is actually built at a density of 7.2 dwelling units per acre, and the area abuts the Royal Arms Apartments to the west, and that property is zoned RM20. The existing community plan policy is residential low-medium, and that's shown in yellow. The current Green Hills Midtown Community Plan is one of our land use policy application plans and was last updated in 2005. This will be updated to community character policies with the next update. The area under study is directly abutting higher density residential medium high density policies on the west and the north, and that's shown in brown. RMH, residential medium high, supports a range of 9 to 20 dwelling units per acre. And the Green Hills Mall in the area in the red dot pattern is a regional activity center that envisions mixed-use development with a regional draw. The residential low-medium policy is used to guide zone changes involving residential development between 2 and 4 dwelling units per acre. The policy does support a mixture of development types as long as they fit within that 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre density range. It's found in established suburban areas that were developed at a time in the past when the market allowed for building houses within this density range. To the southwest of the subject property is Special Policy Area 10 that was applied in the last plan update in 2005. It's shown in the purple dashed area. It encompasses properties on Kimbark Drive and Warfield Drive. And this special policy area allows for density of up to 20 units per acre if lots within this area are consolidated and an overall design plan is proposed to ensure that the entire area works together, orients to the Green Hills Activity Center, improves auto and pedestrian connections to Hillsborough Pike, creates a walkable neighborhood with sidewalk and streetscape improvements, and provides an appropriate transition between Hillsborough Pike and the adjacent residential neighborhoods. The applicant has requested residential medium, which is one of the older LUPA, land use policy application policies that this plan's in. The residential medium policy, also used to guide zone change decisions involving residential development between 4 and 9 dwelling units per acre. The policy, the RM policy, supports a mix of development types, of residential development types, as long as they fit within that range. But it lacks guidance on the physical characteristics of new development and how it should fit into the context of the existing neighborhood. Because of that lack of guidance, staff determined it would be more appropriate in this case to use a policy from our new community character manual, or newer community character manual. In this case, the suburban neighborhood maintenance policy, because the policy itself contains the desired guidance on how development should fit into that existing established context. The CCM provides guidance on details of building form. An example of why neighborhood maintenance is preferable in this case over RM is guidance on height. There's no guidance in RM on height. In the suburban neighborhood maintenance, height is capped at 3 stories. Another example is that suburban neighborhood maintenance provides guidance that buildings should be oriented to the street and should have consistent setbacks to blend in with the surrounding area. And RM contains no guidance on that subject. Staff has also proposed several special policies. They are contained in your staff report. Sorry. There are 4 areas that called for supplemental guidance. The first is access. Shared driveways are discussed in that base neighborhood maintenance policy, but this area could also benefit from the inclusion of alleys with new future developments. Building form, it's recommended narrowing the definition of what 3 stories is to 40 feet max height. And then connectivity with regards to pedestrians and bike improvements. New development should improve bicycle and pedestrian circulation since the existing system in this area is deficient. And then also with vehicular connectivity, new development should add to the overall street network through new improvements where available, and include the improvements recommended in the 2011 Green Hills Area Plan. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our transportation planner, Michael Briggs, to discuss the recommendations of this plan, and then I'll be back to close the presentation.
Hello there. You'll recall that the Planning Commission oversees the implementation of the Major and Collector Street Plan, and that balances right-of-way needs with mobility. Sometimes there's additional transportation plans that are created to examine the operational needs of our streets or to look at new street connections. And those are conducted in various areas of Davidson County where mobility needs are important. And for example, the downtown transportation plan, that's one that has been, was created in the early 2000s and is being updated as we speak by Metro Public Works and RPM Transportation Consultants. One similar study that was completed in 2011 is the Green Hills Area Plan. And this plan was sponsored by the Tennessee Department of Transportation, the Nashville Area Chamber, the Nashville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, Metro Planning, Metro Public Works, the Metro Transit Authority, the Green Hills Action Partnership, and Lipscomb University. And various members of these agencies sat on either a steering committee or the resource team, and were involved in vetting the transportation recommendations. Parsons Brinkerhoff at the time was the primary consultant on that plan. The purpose of the plan was to examine how to improve mobility within and through the Green Hills area with a focus on alleviating congestion along Hillsborough Pike. It explored the various mobility needs and includes a package of recommendations such as implementing further signal coordination, completing strategic street connections, providing more transit options in the area, completing a bicycle network of lanes, development of adequate sidewalks and streetscaping, and handling access management. The plan recognizes the role of both the public and private sector in many of these improvements. So as private sector redevelopment occurs and with some coordination, there are opportunities to implement portions of the package of improvements outlined within the plan. One outcome of the transportation plan was a mapped future road network with identified strategic connections and realignments involving arterials, collectors, and local streets. The purpose of these strategic connections is to provide a more comprehensive street grid on both sides of Hillsborough Pike. The intent of completing a grid system like this is to disperse traffic through various street options, so there is less need to utilize long portions of Hillsborough Pike, which is plagued with traffic congestion. This also creates shorter street blocks, which facilitate an easier bicycle and pedestrian movements, thereby encouraging other forms of travel by design. And you'll notice recommendations such as realigning Abbott Martin and Richard Jones, for example, or a new street extending Hillmont up to Gray Bar. One realignment that is proposed is connecting Warfield Drive directly with Shackelford Road. And that's in the southern portion of the study area. And today that intersection is offset. This improvement would create a four-way intersection. A bike lane network is also identified that includes utilizing Warfield, and sidewalks would also be constructed. This connection is in the area of the proposed plan amendment, and in an effort to balance the property owner's ability to get a good return on investment and the community's need for improved mobility, we would request a right-of-way reservation or dedication with redevelopment to meet the intent of the transportation plan. The realignment of Warfield Drive is one piece of the package of transportation improvements helping to establish a more thorough grid network in Green Hills. Keep in mind as redevelopment occurs, we will have difficult decisions involving access management that utilizes medians, streetscaping, transit access and accommodations, bike lane connectivity, and sidewalks that will be needed to develop a more comprehensive transportation network in the area. These improvements may be items that Metro will pursue and fund on its own or will need to be coordinated with redevelopment. We plan to ask the Planning Commission to consider the Green Hills Area Plan at the upcoming November meeting for adoption. And I'll hang around to address any questions that you all may have about the plan and the implications upon the proposed plan amendment.
In closing, the neighborhood maintenance policy could be appropriate for this area. It is a medium density residential neighborhood already and is in with walking distance of intense commercial, residential, and office development. It's an area where infrastructure can be upgraded and is in with walking distance of bus service. However, this area is in need of significant infrastructure additions before it can accommodate safe and comfortable bicycle and pedestrian travel within its street network. Staff is recommending that you defer this application to the November 14th meeting. Staff understands that the applicant does not wish to defer their application and they desire to move ahead with their individual project. But the 2-month deferral will give staff time to hold a community meeting with a larger area to continue the conversation about the entire traffic plan and what it means for the larger Green Hills area and not just focus on this one piece. This will ensure that the community understands the recommendations of the Green Hills area plan and also what not adopting the plan will mean for the larger area. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll go ahead with the public hearing. We're going to open the public hearing on item 3A. We'll discuss it and vote on it. Then we'll have a staff presentation on 3B and a public hearing on it. So anything that wants to be said on this one needs to be restricted to the 3A portion of it, not the 3B. The applicant is allowed 10 minutes if you're here, and if you want to save 2 minutes of that back for rebuttal, you may do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to address you all today. I am here to speak. I know that we're taking this sort of piecemeal, but I'm here to speak in support of 2013 SP-025-001, which is otherwise known as the Green Hills Station zone change request, and also here in support of the corresponding major plan amendment to change the land use policy from RLM to RM. I, along with many of my constituents, who I've heard from both on an individual basis and also in the form of 3 public meetings that we've had, are very supportive of this zone change request and the corresponding plan amendment. There are several of my constituents that are here today that hopefully will have the opportunity to speak to you should they so desire. What I'm mostly going to talk about to you today, though, is what we just had a presentation on, which is the Green Hills Area Transportation Plan. I actually, along with my colleague, Councilman Carter Todd, were a couple of the co-founders of what was called the Green Hills Resource Team. The Green Hills Resource Team was a group of community activists, area business owners, various metro departments, and we came together and we basically came up with this idea of, okay, there's been a lot of plans, a lot of study, a lot of talk about Green Hills traffic. What do we do with all this information? And the idea was to kind of coalesce it into one document, one plan that basically captured everything, all the study that's been done over the years, and the thought that's been put into it. And it would serve as a resource. It would serve as a resource for the community, for developers to look at if they were going to do future development in the area. And now, fortunately, planners are looking at it as well. So I was instrumental in forming that group and was there along the way as we formatted this plan and came up with this plan. So I think that I can speak pretty intelligibly about it. And so since I was involved with the plan, I'm very familiar with the recommendations that it makes. I'm very familiar with the area that we're talking about specifically, and specifically the Warfield-Shackelford alignment of that plan. And what I'm really here today to ask you to do is to essentially disregard that recommendation of the plan. I know that sounds very unusual that I'm here asking you to disregard part of a plan that I helped put together, but I think I can tell you the reasons why I think that is the case, and that's what we should do. Again, I'm supportive of the plan. I'm very grateful that staff is paying attention to it. That was what our intent was. We wanted people to look at it and to study it, and so I really am grateful to them that they're raising the question and saying, hey, we've got this plan, we need to look at it. But with this specific recommendation, I do take issues, and if you'll allow me a little time, I can tell you what those issues are. The first is that the Warfield-Shackelford alignment was really related, and it was driven by one specific project. It had one specific project in mind. You may recall in the presentation that you saw, I believe it was Policy Area 10, I think is what it was referred to. But this is the Kimbark-Warfield neighborhood that is in between Hillsborough and Lone Oak. A couple years ago, when the plan was being formatted and put together, there was a large-scale project that was being conceived. There was a partnership that was going through, and they were actively trying to acquire all of the residential parcels within that stretch. It was looking increasingly like that we were going to be looking at a large-scale mixed-use development for that entire project. As such, it made sense for us to think about aligning Shackelford and Warfield because we were going to have a blank canvas. All of those residential houses were going to be demolished, the site was going to be scraped, and we could essentially start from scratch. And because we were going to have that ability, or we thought we were going to have that ability, it only made sense that we would take that opportunity to align Warfield and Shackelford. Since that time, it would seem that that plan has been tabled for the time being, and I think that's evidenced by the individual development that's going on in that neighborhood right now. If you drove on Kimbark right now, you would see individual redevelopment of a couple of those parcels, and what that indicates to me is that the larger scale plan is being tabled, at least for now. So because that's the case, I don't know if it necessarily makes sense for us to again consider looking at the Warfield-Shackelford alignment. It made sense at the time. Again, this was 2010, 2011 when the plan was formalized. But we no longer, it appears, are going to have the opportunity of having a blank canvas in that neighborhood like everyone once considered. So I would just put that forward to you to consider that alignment really was driven by one specific plan in mind. Another point to consider is that the Green Hills area plan was never officially adopted by this body, by the council, and I know that is what you're being asked to consider at this point. And again, I do hope that over the coming months we'll consider looking at this plan and consider adopting it, consider making it part of the community plan. But as it stands right now, it is not a part of the community plan. It, again, was intended to serve as a resource for the community, for developers, for the area, but it wasn't necessarily policy. In a lot of respects, a lot of the recommendations were wish list items. There was really no indication of whether or not they'll actually ever come to fruition, but they were put together in this plan. And so, again, I know that we're being asked to consider adopting that, and I encourage that. But, again, with the specific recommendation for the alignment of Shackelford-Warfield, I ask that you consider disregarding that for the time being. Again, because it was never really adopted in a formalized setting like we're considering doing right now, there really wasn't that much public input into it. It was a group of professional planners and traffic engineers and people who have a very vested interest in the Green Hills community, but there really wasn't any input. I think if you ask some of the constituents who might be here today or other constituents in the area, they probably don't want Warfield and Shackelford to be aligned. For one, it could potentially potentially mean more traffic and more speeders in the area, whereas the setup of the infrastructure right now, it's a natural barrier for people to have to stop, make a turn onto Lone Oak, and then turn onto Shackelford, which will prevent speed, which I can tell you speeding is already a real issue on Shackelford, and it's already a very narrow street with the sidewalk right up against the street. It's potentially a dangerous situation, and so I think you would find a lot of residents on Shackelford and in that area probably would not be in favor of actually connecting those streets. So I would ask that you consider that. Finally, I guess I would ask that you think about the notion that really, as it stands right now, there is no funding set aside to make this connection, at least that I know of. There are no machinations currently going on to acquire other rights of way on other parcels in that specific area. We're really asking the developer to table their proposal, their project, which I, in the community, again, think is a very, very good project. We're asking them and basically holding them hostage on the idea that there may one day be a connection of these two roads, but maybe not. And so I ask that you just consider that, you bear in mind that we currently don't have any funds budgeted for the acquisition of the rights of way or the infrastructure improvements going along. And they're also, I'd also put forward to you that just bringing Warfield north to meet Shackelford is not the only way to align this intersection. You could also bring Shackelford south to align with Warfield, and that would actually require getting rights of way and it would affect far less parcels on the east side of Lone Oak than it would be if you actually aligned Warfield north to Shackelford. So again, I absolutely applaud the staff for what they do, not only in planning for Nashville's future, but again, in asking us to consider this plan. I really can't say that enough. But I do think we're putting this applicant in a very, very difficult situation when we've already come very far in terms of talking to the community. This applicant has really gone out of their way to get neighborhood input to be a proactive developer as opposed to a reactive developer. And as a council member, I appreciate that so much. And so because of that, I really want to see that they get a fair shake. And if for no other reason, I ask that you consider that this project is really a great, great project for many reasons. It preserves green space and trees. It provides a unique development concept to my district that right now is being plagued by the same kind of redevelopment, the tear down of one house and putting up two in its place. It provides for 2 points of ingress and egress to the development as opposed to the 6 driveways that could be put in place if the properties were developed under the existing zoning. It provides me and my constituents input with regard to the height of the structures, the building materials, because this is an SP situation. It requires the implementation of stormwater infrastructure and sidewalks, both of which my district is in dire need of. And it creates more diverse housing stock that will contribute to the diversity of my district. So for these reasons and more, I'm in strong support of the development and the community plan amendment from taking it from RLM to RM. And I ask for your support on both. Thank you again for affording me this time. I know that this is a tricky situation, and you all often find yourself in tricky situations as we do at the council. So I appreciate your consideration and your letting me provide some color on this specific situation. So thank you.
Applicant now be allowed 10 minutes. The item 3A pertains to changing the policy from residential low medium to residential medium. Doesn't have anything to do with what's going to happen after that is voted up or down. So that's what we'll be discussing under 3A.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Michael Garrigan, 516 Heather Place. I'm a civil engineer with Dale & Associates. We're the site design and consulting firm representing the owner and developer on 3A. I had a great speech written, but it combines 3A and 3B, so I'm going to try to keep my thoughts just to the policy amendment. The emails that are going around are ones that were sent to me. Since there were confusion, you now have 15 from Liz McKenzie. That was one of them. But I think from a density standpoint, the policy amendment makes all the sense in the world. There's very high density to the west and the north, low density to the east and the south. This tract of Lone Oaks already, over 7 units. It already exceeds residential low, medium today. So residential medium at a density standpoint makes all the sense in the world. We're not opposed to neighborhood maintenance. In fact, a lot of the aspects that neighborhood maintenance ties down, or all of them, we're already providing in our 3B project. So we're certainly not opposed to that. A couple of things I would ask. Obviously, we're asking that the transportation element be removed from the policy amendment. It's not desired by, obviously, my client, and it's not desired by any of the neighbors that we've met with. And just to give you an idea, we've had 3 meetings, 2 of which we hosted and mailed out the rezoning requirement of 600 feet, and that was well over 100 notices. And the one sandwich between was a policy amendment, which we prepared, I think staff mailed, and that was 620 notices. So there's been a lot of people notified about this. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of correspondence, and I've yet to hear from one neighbor that wants the streets to connect. I've heard a lot of fear of they're dealing with a lot right now with speeding and cut through on Shackelford, Lone Oak, Oriole, and Warfield, and there's a lot of fear that this would just add to that. I also want to point out that, the roadway, it's pretty unrealistic. There's probably 10 to 12 properties that would completely have to be purchased, or there would just be a road going through their backyard. And I wouldn't say it's not necessary, but to me, the benefits are far outweighed by the negatives that this would create for the community, the homeowners, their investments, and their quality of living. So lastly, we have heard one request from the community that we've agreed to, that we limit the policy amendment, whether it be neighborhood maintenance or residential medium, to the center line of Lone Oak. I agreed to do that and request that from you guys, that it would just be the parcels on the west side of Lone Oak that back up to the apartments, and then everything east of Lone Oak remains as is. So, in summary, whether it's neighborhood maintenance, whether it's residential medium, we're okay with both. We do ask that it be limited to the parcels on the west side of Lone Oak, and we do ask that the transportation element not be included. Thank you for your time.
And you've got 2 minutes remaining for rebuttal after we. Anyone in the audience in support of this policy change? Please come forward and state your name. We'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay. My name's Fleda Anderson. My husband and I live in an infill house on Lone Oak. We support the project that would be zoned for high density because of the amenities that have been discussed, but we're not in favor of increasing the density for the larger area, primarily because of all of the building that's going on in Green Hills right now. We have to depend on the goodness of strangers to let us out of our driveway. And so, we would appreciate keeping it as it is, or at the very minimum limiting it to the west side, because of the 22-story project that's going up on the corner of Hillsborough and Richard Jones. So thank you for the chance to comment.
Anyone else wishing to speak in support of changing from low medium to medium density?
Hello. I live at 1816 Warfield Drive, and personally looking at this proposed change with the road coming through, myself, my neighbors, everyone would, if not lose their backyard, lose their whole houses. And we definitely agree with withdrawing the idea of cutting the road through Shackelford to the proposed Hill Center, and we also believe it would increase speed, and it's bad enough now. Thank you.
Oh, would you give your name again?
Tim Kelly?
Okay.
Tim Kelly?
Jim Kelly, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, you got 2 minutes for rebuttal, but I don't know what you'd rebut, so. Is there a motion to close the public hearing on item 3A? Okay, motion second, all in favor, aye? Aye. Motion carries. Jeff?
No comments.
Greg? No, excuse me, Derek.
No comments at this point.
Greg?
Just real quick, I've always told Councilman McGuire that he could move to Creve Hall and wouldn't have to deal with all this traffic. And I mean that seriously. We used to be seatmates, but thank you, Councilman, and everybody coming down for the hearing. And I know it's a tough situation. I guess I'm one of those guys who cut through Green Hills sometimes, Councilman, and I apologize for that. But these are very serious issues, and sometimes, you'll get a study, a transportation study or a planning study, and at the time, it really made sense when it was created. But 3 years pass by, and some of those plans change, and I know that whenever you talk about creating a new road and you have to purchase those right-of-ways, that's a really tough decision. So I understand it. I would like to hear what my other colleagues have to say.
Andre?
I guess I have a lot of questions about the timing. I think if there is going to be a discussion of the transportation plan, when is that plan scheduled?
It's scheduled in November. What this is a question of whether or not you increase the intensity without requiring the transportation improvements in the Green Hills area that have been called for by the plan. I mean, it's staff has got to have some direction. We've got tremendous community input out here not to improve or increase the density without traffic improvements, and we've got a situation here where we're being requested to increase the density without transportation improvements, and we don't disagree that the density is right, but either for this and for future, we need to know whether you wish us to, this meeting had it on the other side of Hillsborough Road, a case where they did not want the increase in density because the transportation improvements weren't there. And so we've got to just, from a staff perspective, we've got to have some consistency. We can advise applicants on where density is appropriate. We just need to know whether we need to advise them as to whether the transportation improvements that have been called for are something that's important or not important. That's kind of what this is at the really core of planning and probably as much as almost anything you've had. So we need that direction from you. That's why we kind of brought that forward.
Well, I guess it seems like it makes sense to discuss them simultaneously if we're going to discuss the transportation plan that we figured all out at the same meeting.
Just to clarify, we've requested deferral to November to have the whole community discuss that transportation plan. This is simply one leg of the plan, and we felt like it was more important to have the entire community discuss whether or not they wanted those transportation improvements. They are very controversial. I agree 100% with the councilman. They're extremely controversial. But if you're looking 2 years ago, they're basically the only improvements that could be done. And so if we're not willing to do those, then we need to make a decision as to whether we're willing to increase density or not, regardless of the transportation improvements. And I'm not suggesting that there's a right or a wrong. There's just the decision needs to be made. If we say, no, we don't want the transportation plan, but we are willing to do density, that's okay too. It's just something that we need to be aware of, and the community needs to be aware of that as you get these, or you're kind of going to get them on the whim of whether the project itself is preserves green space or something like that, as opposed to whether or not it's actually increasing traffic on there. And we're really at a very difficult position of advising residents out here.
I'd like to hear further discussion too. I probably might have other questions also, but let's keep hearing from everybody.
Warfield either.
Stewart?
The one thing I'm sure about is that in spite of the overwhelming need of a larger population area in Davidson County for more density, the one thing I'm sure about is we cannot continue to zone for more density without transportation changes. So there's three options here, at least. One is to move the discussion down further down the road to look at this plan, and we've had one element of it highlighted, and I guess there's some others that we haven't heard as much detail about. Or we can reject this because it requires more density and we don't have more infrastructure. Or we can go ahead and approve this without it. Those are the three options. I cannot support this in spite of the very able marshaling of arguments and facts by the citizens and the councilmen. I can't support it at this time without some changes in the transportation system. But I'm not particularly for those. I'm not sure yet. I mean, we may just say, sorry, we're for density, but not here, which we do so often. So if that's not confusing enough, I'll turn it over to Hunter, who should really be able to confuse you. Yeah.
I wanted to ask staff about the transportation plan, and there's a line drawn on the plan. As we know, these plans are often sort of 30,000 feet, and so there's often different ways that we can make connections work. And I was curious, as the councilman had suggested, that there appear to be other ways that this connection could be made. Even if in November it's identified as an important connection to make, aren't there other alternatives, other options in terms of where this alignment is and how it might affect this property?
Yeah, I think that's something that we could consider. I think we just need more time to analyze the area a little bit further. That's what we're requesting, is to have that broader conversation, since that affects different property owners on another side of Shackelford there.
Okay, well, thanks, Mark. I guess I sort of agree with everyone on this one. In that, better connectivity in this area is certainly needed, and the idea of connecting Shackelford to Warfield, I think has considerable value. We've gone through a planning exercise that has involved the community and a large group of stakeholders that have identified that. Regardless of exactly how that alignment happens, we're going to have to take private properties. Could be the properties that we're considering in the next case, even potentially. So I think the developers that have asked for the zone change for item 3B, who are asking for this policy change, know that they're at that risk, I would expect. So I'm not sure in favor of sort of holding a property at hostage until we get a plan before the commission. I think regardless of what that plan ends up being, increased density in this area is something that, in this specific area, is something that I believe I'm in favor of, given the special policies nearby, the multifamily that's already there adjacent to it, the need for intensifying this center as well. So I think I would be in support of the staff's recommended policy. And I'm not sure exactly what approving the transportation element means today, either including it or not including it. Because is that specifically the alignment of that's been identified in the unadopted Green Hills plan? Or I'm not sure I understand what the transportation element is.
There's two things. One, it would impact the rezoning by identifying that alignment, and that alignment would be the alignment until such time as alternatives are suggested or gone through. Yes, it would then lead to, the logical thing it would lead to would be to turn down the rezoning as presented, as it will be presented.
If the transportation element.
Correct.
Is, and again, the element that we're talking about is not in our current community plan. Is that right?
No, the element is in the plan that was developed. That it's not in the community plan. No, it's just something that we're aware of, and it's one of the few solutions to the Green Hills traffic problem. And I think it's something that staff feels the commission needs to be aware of. And if it's not something the commission wants to use, then you don't have to use that. Staff feels like that having the whole plan, having the community discuss the whole plan, having the community decide with the Planning Commission whether the whole plan is viable or not would be the more appropriate thing, as opposed to, in effect, precluding something that has been out there and discussed and was part of a large process in order to increase the density on something that there's not a requirement to increase the density on at this point in time.
Well, it also seems like you have to look at a more holistic plan that tells us, as we're looking at these street connectors, about what's going on with transit on 21st, Hillsborough Road. And there's not just, street connections are not the only part of a solution. There are lots of components, and you weigh factors and priorities of timing and all that. And so it seems like if we're going to hear the transportation plan as a whole, it would be helpful to see all the components of it before we talk about any specific connector, or before we make decisions about any specific connectors. Because if you're going to increase transit on Hillsborough Road, that's going to affect where nodes are for changes and which roads are coming out there, et cetera. So it seems like it makes sense to have a more integrated decision-making process.
We've got a representative here from Public Works. Could come up. Do you have any ideas on this? Has this been discussed since you've come back over to Public Works?
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Honeycutt with the Department of Public Works. I don't, at this time, have anything to add, and I haven't been a part of the study that had been done, so I don't have anything to add at this time.
Have any of the projects, the road projects in the plan, been funded, or is it even in the capital spending plan, or is there?
I am not aware of part of the capital spending plan for us being funded at this time. I can check with the department as well just to verify, but I'm not aware of.
And do we have estimates on the cost of each one of the roads or anything like that?
There is signal plan, signal improvements, things like that. But as far as cost estimates, I'm not aware of those either as well.
Okay, thanks.
Jonathan's just recently come back over Public Works. He hadn't been privy to some of those discussion processes. Thank you.
So, Michael, so when we put a line in the plan, have we considered other alternatives? I guess I need to understand if truly other alternatives are out there and could be considered, and whether we've looked at it, how detailed of a study has this been, and because again, I support the idea of connectivity, and I understand that the transportation, why that's important in this particular area, but I'm uncomfortable holding a case hostage until a plan, an unadopted concept is approved or disapproved.
Yeah, I can say personally, we haven't had the opportunity to sit down and evaluate whether or not there would be other realignments. It's probably a more appropriate question for the council member since he was involved in creating the plan. I can tell you from the list of people who participated in it, some of them have moved on to other positions, particularly with the State Department of Transportation. We've sort of touched base with them to see what their thoughts are on this plan. We've also talked with the Transit Alliance on their thoughts in terms of buy-in on the plan. Some of those members have been involved in it, but we haven't really had the opportunity to have a broader discussion with the community on this at this point. And so to specifically say that we've looked at Warfield, Shackelford, and different alignments, we haven't. It's not to say that there may be a different connection that could work in the future, or this may be the best connection, and we can't say either way at this point.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that's not a lot of guidance, but I feel we need just a little bit more time to look at the broader picture of these street connections.
Okay.
Judy?
Yeah, this is a pretty big project, and I would have no problem deferring it until November the 14th to give all parties opportunity to look closely at it and address the issues that need to be addressed.
This is a right brain, left brain, middle brain type of situation. And it's very reminiscent of a situation that happened in Hermitage several years ago. And over my big objections, there was a development that was approved where there was a house that was going to be built where a future road was going to be. There was a sketch in Public Works which noted that there was going to be a bridge built over a railroad track, and it was going to take this particular corner. But legally, we were told that we had to go ahead and act on it because you could not base your decision on something that might happen. Now, legally, the question is this related to that same type of thought? Would you like to comment on that from a legal standpoint?
I wasn't familiar with that particular instance. I wasn't with the Planning Commission at that time, so I'm not aware.
This has been probably 12 years ago.
Yes. So without being privy to the legal advice that was rendered at that time, I don't want to go contrary to it, but I can say that I think this is something that you can consider. It is not binding. It has not been adopted by any regulatory body, so it does not require that you act in accordance therewith. But it is something that I think you can consider.
I think equally as important, the applicant clearly can develop under the zoning that he has now. And if he came in to ask for permits to develop under the zoning he has now, he could do that. What they're asking for is a change in the policy that's not an entitlement. The policy change is something that the commission needs to look at in light of all the factors that you think are appropriate for increasing the policy, the land use policy, to allow the rezoning. So I would argue that he is entitled to develop it under the zoning he has now. He's not entitled unilaterally to a policy amendment to allow him to upzone the property.
Okay. Well, the other side of my brain then tells me that this is something that is needed because, I was in Green Hills last night, and I know what the traffic situation is like there. So let's go middle brain for a second. Is there any way that we can speed up the process? Rather than November, is there anything we can do to compromise and do it in late September, early October?
Yeah, we've got to give, in order to have the community meeting, at least 15 days notice. And then, with our other workload involving Nashville next, in order for us to really grasp the full nature of this plan, November would probably be about the earliest.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we can't do it faster, but I would still be inclined to defer.
Phil?
Okay. In order to get the density that the developer wants, we have to pass the policy change. Is that correct?
You need to amend the plan to allow this density, correct?
Okay. Yeah, I really have a problem. We're looking at 3 properties here in terms of development. And as Hunter said, I really have a problem with holding up this development here based on what might be or might not be. As the councilman explained to us at the beginning, this plan, I think, if I heard him correctly, this transportation plan, the genesis of it came about when there was a possibility of a large-scale development that would clear out all of the existing buildings. And as he said, they would have a blank sheet of paper to work with, and it would be easy to make all of these connections from one street to another that are offset in the process of doing that development. Is that accurate, Sean?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now that possibility evaporated. It went away. And now we're just looking at doing 3 properties. On Shackelford Drive.
Just to clarify, maybe the councilman can. The potential project, a good portion of that property is still owned by one individual, and that potential still exists to redevelop significantly in that area.
Well, again, but we're talking about what might be. I mean, that's, I've got properties in Donaldson that might be developed. It'd be a good thing if they did, but nobody's stepping forward, nobody's waving the flag. On Shackelford Drive, coming up to Lone Oak, are those empty lots? Are there structures on those? Or?
Yes, there are structures.
There are structures, okay. So then, and these are like, are they single-family homes or duplexes, or are they owner-occupied structures, or what?
I didn't look at the ownership to see if they were owner-occupied or not.
Okay. So looking at connecting Warfield and Shackelford Drive, short of some kind of condemnation or taking these to make that connection, it seems unlikely that in the near future that's going to happen. Even if you had a transportation plan in place that said this is what we want to do, you still got to take those properties in order to make that road connect. And condemnation is not a popular thing. I would like to give the developer the ability to go ahead and do what he wants to do, but I'm conflicted with saying you can't do it until we look at a plan here that may or may not ever come to fruition. So I'm very conflicted here. I don't know.
Let me ask a question a little bit differently, if I may. If we weren't talking about the transportation plan for the moment, we'd be asking, we weren't sure that we were ready to change the overall policy and the bigger thing because there's a bigger picture that's going to be discussed, even if it's the community plan. Would we want to consider a development here in a vacuum related to the general community plan that we're thinking about? I mean, we've looked at other places where we've said we're looking at the overall, this is a transitional area, we're looking at overall planning of the area, so we don't want to change this one site because it's relative to something that we're really closely about to consider. So even if the transportation plan weren't in there, we're looking at changing a community plan just on that whole stretch on both sides of that street.
Well, that's another thing. The developer in his comments said that they would actually like to limit the area to only one side of the street and use the center line of Lone Oak as the dividing line between the more dense development and the lower density. So, I mean, that would call for an entirely new application to be able to do that.
No, you can do something less for it. However, it works out better for the street if you don't use the street as the dividing line. You use the rear property lines because you want light-facing development. You don't want heavy development facing light development right across the street. It's better to do that on the rear.
When did that policy come in? I remember not too many, 2 or 3 years ago when we were doing the Lebanon Road UDO, and there was a section off of Lebanon Road 1 block away that I wanted to include both sides of the street. And at that point in time, the planning staff said, no, we need to use the center line here because that would intrude into the existing neighborhood. So we need to keep the denser development on one side of the street and use the center line as the divider here. So when did that?
Unless you're going to, and I believe I know the situation you're talking about. That was all to be reoriented to Lebanon Road, not to be oriented to that rear street. So what you're doing was deepening the property along Lebanon Road. So all that would be able to develop that way. But normally you wouldn't use the center line of the street. I mean, it's just you're going to wind up with incompatible developments across the street from each other.
Well, what I was going to say was that we tend to want to look at the bigger picture when we can, and if we're about to be looking at the bigger picture, it seems like we want to make a broader decision with lots more factors to consider.
Go ahead, Mike. Planning is about the future and not about the right now. And that's why I just feel like I have to point out, in a certain sense, we're speaking of this project as though there were an entitlement to it. There is no entitlement to a change in the law of metropolitan Nashville, which is what our plan is. That's what the zoning categories are. We have someone who has every right to propose a plan. They're in that business. That's how they make their profits. That's how they pay their employees. And they have proposed a plan. There is no expectation that we do that because someone wants to make money at it or because we think it'd be nice to have more houses there for the restaurants or whatever. I think the whole idea here of development and planning has somehow crept into a vague assumption that, well, they asked for it and they've got some good-looking plans here. It's a change in the law. There's no entitlement to it. And maybe we don't get to a point where everyone likes this. So for me, what's before us today is whether to approve an intensification of use in this area without any corresponding help to the traffic situation. I don't see how we can do that as a planning body.
So when future developments come, are you going to require, I mean, when there's limited street access, ability to get around, are we going to start as a commission requiring traffic plans before rezoning takes place?
We do that.
Yes, we should be doing that in every instance.
We do it now, though.
Not always would it require that, but if it's the kind of situation we have in Green Hills, yeah, I hope we're doing that right now. And I don't mean that to be anti-development. I think I've supported most more intense uses in the county lately for a lot of reasons. But I'm not sure I can this one, at least not now. So they may have a point about the particulars of the transportation plan may not be something we ever approve. Some of the folks out here may have a point that it's not exactly what we need. But that's not what's before us today. What's before us today is this rezoning. And we're not obligated to approve it because someone proposes it to us. That was my thought.
Just so I get it straight, I know we're trying to get to the transportation piece, but what is currently allowed by right on this particular on this property?
The properties today, there are 3 lots. They're zoned R10, which means single family and duplex. So they have a right to build a duplex on each one of those lots.
How big? Or how many rooms? I mean, do we know any of that?
We don't regulate that. It's
Okay, so they're going from 6 units basically to 8.
Right. That's right.
By right, they could build 6.
By right, they're asking for 8.
So generally, like I guess our traffic studies, I mean, generally we say, well, does it lower the road capacity from a C to a D, or do we do that? And I just question whether that would happen with increasing by 2 units. No offense to anybody on the commission. Would it?
Right. I think they were talking about traffic studies in context of much larger developments.
Much larger.
We do that.
Okay. So I guess in my mind, I think that this is a good development, and I know we don't have to approve it by right, or we can. If it's I think as a development, it stands on its own as a good development. I think that we're looking at the larger transportation plan that could take a lot of time if we have the correct community meetings and all that. And I don't think that this particular plan should be held up because it's not changing the transportation conditions on the road per se. If it was a 200 lot change, or if it was going to change the traffic in Green Hills, I would say, yeah, well, then we should definitely do that. Now, I do think as a commission, the staff needs to know, where we go on transportation. But I know that's going to take, I don't want us to piecemeal that. I want us to really look into that. So I would be willing to vote for this particular proposal because I think it's a good proposal on its face for planning. And I don't think that it's going to have the traffic impact that we're talking about here. Now, we need to determine that within the next, 6 months to a year, what that policy for traffic is going to be. But I think I'm at this point, I've heard a lot of the discussion, and I'm okay with doing that.
Let me ask a question, then I'm going to ask for a vote. If the transportation plan was in force today, what would be the staff's recommendation, and what impact would it have on this request?
I mean, basically, the staff recommendation would be to preserve the right-of-way and to design around the right-of-way, design the project around that. We're not opposed to the project. We're not opposed to the density. We're opposed to placing the project in a location that would preclude the road from being built. I mean, that's basically it. Now,
Rick, the study hasn't been done in detail that shows that that's the only alignment, that this property affects the only alignment.
I think that, to be honest, I think that there are probably 10 alignments that you could put through there, and they could go anywhere, and they could go through any property.
So
I think that all we have is a history of the Green Hills area for probably the last at least 15 years, if not longer, complaining about traffic. The Department of Transportation 2 years ago with the councilman put together a team to try to analyze all the plans. We've done sidewalk studies. We've done studies of limiting curb cuts. We've done studies of widening the road. And so really 3 years ago, I think you spent 18 months working on this plan to say, okay, what could be done in Green Hills? Looking at all those things. And this is what they came out with. I'll be honest, I don't think, whether it'll solve the problem, I don't know. I can't say that. But staff needs some direction to whether or not to use this plan or not use the plan. If we can make the land use assumptions in terms of what makes good land use, and this does. But if we're here today as a commission saying we want to increase the density, but we're not going to follow the plan, and then next month we have exactly the same situation on one of the other streets, we've got to be able to say, well, the plan's not relevant. I'm not even sure, even if we'd adopted the plan, the arguments that are being used today are if the plan was in adoption, you could always still find an alternative location.
And I guess approving, if we think this land use policy makes sense for this street, which I do, that doesn't preclude us from approving a transportation plan that shows Shackelford connecting to Warfield. It doesn't preclude us from approving this rezoning and building this project and still ultimately connecting the two streets. We know there's multiple ways you could connect those streets. So the question, and I agree with Stuart, in that the question is, do we think this land use policy makes sense for this particular area? And that's the question at hand right now. And we can, even though we may not have anything on the books, we do know that there is a plan that's moving forward that's recommending better connectivity in this area, which makes me feel even more comfortable voting for a policy change today. Knowing that the recommendations that are currently in place are, for better connectivity.
Okay, I want a motion.
Okay.
I move we defer till November 14th.
Second.
Got a motion second to defer till November 14th. All in favor?
Aye.
Let me see a show of hands. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? Okay, the motion fails. Need another motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve item 3A. And Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, do we want to do both sides of the street?
We haven't heard anything.
Staff, let me try to advise the commission, because I'm not sure to get you where you want to go. Staff would recommend both sides of the street, period. If you want a recommendation that does not include the road, the recommendation needs to be staff's recommendation without the road improvement. Otherwise, it'd be staff's recommendation with the road improvements. It would put you at odds with the next case. So I think what you want is probably staff's recommendation without the road.
I move that we make the staff recommendation without the roads.
Got a motion and a second. Hunter?
Could I ask for clarification as to whether that's for the residential medium density policy or the suburban neighborhood maintenance?
Staff recommended suburban neighborhood maintenance.
And let me point out that that policy allows a range of up to 20 units to the acre, whereas the residential medium density allows up to 9.
But the density ranges of the community character manual are not allowable by right. They're not within that. They're specific to the location. So that's why the other policies are important. Context.
So it doesn't necessarily mean if a 28 unit to the acre development comes in, we would.
But can I add something to my motion? I'm sorry. Is that I still think that we make a recommendation to the staff that the transportation plan be reviewed and updated with more community input. I mean, I think maybe that's not part of that motion, but a suggestion to the staff. But that's because I think that you're right, Rick, is that, the transportation is very important and it needs to be looked at. The study needs to be updated. And you guys need clear direction. I don't deny that at all. But with this particular instance, I think that the transportation piece.
You made the original motion.
Yes.
Could you say it again? I'm not sure I understand.
Turn on your mic, Andrea.
Could you repeat the motion, please?
Yes, I make a motion to approve the staff's recommendation without considering the transportation plan in this case.
For which zoning? For which zoning? RM or suburban neighborhoods?
Suburban neighborhood maintenance.
And who made the second on that?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let me see a show of hands on this one. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. We'll now hear item 3B.
Just straightforward, I mean, we don't mind presenting this, but staff would have no, I mean, we would support the applicant's, I think, application. Once you've made that policy call, we would support the application. I mean, we don't have any.
I just want to ask a question back to that, just to know what happens in the future. Excuse me, one sec. If the road plan and if the whole transportation plan for the general area gets approved and some ideas are presented that we're considering doing these roads, would the suburban maintenance be the zoning that the staff would recommend specifically, or would they allow for some commercial or small neighborhood?
No, this is the right zoning. This is the right plan, policy.
So that would go with these roads that you're talking about. That's what you want.
But it's the right policy for this location relative to the Green Hills Activity Center. Yeah. With or without the road. Yeah.
Rick, are you suggesting we don't have to hear the case? Because now
I'm suggesting we would have put it on consent where the decision you had made there, we would have put it on consent. I don't think the applicant, I don't know if anybody's here to speak against it.
When we had the public hearing, I asked for anyone in opposition. There was no one in opposition, so I think we can go back and put it on consent. Is there a motion to put item 3B on consent?
So moved.
Doug?
No, if it's not on consent, you have to open the public hearing.
If I could address the commission just for a second. I agree with you, but I think if you listen to the testimony of at least one witness, she seemed in opposition to increased density. I grant you that she spoke when you invited her to come speak in support, but if you listen to her testimony, she was not, in fact, in support. So before the commission moves towards assuming that there's no one in opposition, I would invite you to open it up for a public hearing.
Then we will hear item 3B, and we'll open the public hearing.
This is item 3B. This is the zone change associated with the policy amendment that was just discussed. This is a request to permit 8 residential units. Staff recommendation is to approve with conditions and disapprove without all staff conditions, considering your approval of the policy amendment. This is some reviews of the site. The current zoning is R10. As Catherine stated earlier, it would permit a maximum density or a maximum number of units of 6 units for 2 duplexes, or 2 units on each lot. The proposed zoning, again, is to permit 8 residential units. The existing policy is residential low medium, or was residential low medium. It's not consistent with that policy. You just approved the suburban neighborhood maintenance without the transportation or without the street alignment, so the proposed plan is consistent with the policy. This is the development, is again 8 units. It's a cottage type development. The 2 units along Lone Oak have front wraparound porches. They address Lone Oak, and they also address the open space. The other 6 units also have front porches that address the central open space. Access is at the rear and loops around the project. It's 2 access points. The property, it contains 21 parking spots, 14 are in garages, and 7 surface spaces. And in conclusion, staff is recommending approval and with conditions and disapproval without all staff conditions, as it is consistent with the policy just adopted.
This item is open for public hearing. The applicant will be allowed 10 minutes, and you keep 2 back for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Again, my name is Michael Garrigan, 516 Heather Place, representing the owner and developer on this project. We met a lot with the community on this, kind of like the previous case boiled down to road or no road. This one boiled down to 6 units versus 8 units. They're dealing, Lone Oak, Shackelford, Oriole, and Warfield, they're all dealing with the McDuplex 2-for-1, tear down, rebuild, 3 stories, setback to setback, front-loaded garages, cars having to back out of their driveways into the street. Each unit gets a driveway. So, if you fit within that pattern, you would have 6 units, all with garage doors facing Lone Oak, all backing into Lone Oak. So what we've presented is 8 cottage, arranged in a cottage-style fashion. They're all 2 stories. Access is limited to the two driveways, with the maneuvering potential to back out and pull out head first, so there's no more traffic backing into the road. We've provided for a stub to the north there, so that if this pattern were to continue in lieu of the 2-for-1 tear down and rebuild, we could all share access, limiting driveway cuts on Lone Oak, which will really help out a lot with the traffic on that road specifically. The smaller homes were something that the neighborhood liked. The fact that they weren't as large as what they're seeing leads to them appealing to young professionals or retirees, so that not necessarily a family of 4 that has 4 vehicles. And again, that helps with the traffic we've all talked about. We're proposing new sidewalk along Lone Oak, new curb and gutter along Lone Oak, replacing the roadside ditch that's protected by a guardrail with curb and gutter and storm infrastructure. So there's just a lot of positives you can get from something like this to go from 6 to 8, and I think that's why the community has supported us to this point. So we would ask for your support tonight and be happy to answer any questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support? Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, is a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion is second, close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Got a motion second for approval with staff recommendations.
I'd just like to be heard before we vote.
Go ahead.
I'll be voting against it. I realize that with the previous discussion, the staff needs to say they're for it, but I think by piecemeal expansion of density without giving the development community the idea that, well, we're going to have to do something about transportation is the wrong planning decision. So I realize that we've already decided what we want to do with this, but as a matter of that principle and the feeling that the only real way after this vote to bring any relief to the traffic situation will be a moratorium on development and rezoning in Green Hills, which I would have to support in light of this, I'm going to vote no.
Any other comments? Got a motion second to approve with staff recommendations. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
One no. Okay. Now ready for item number 5. I think
6.
5. Before we start, Craig, could you kind of clarify what happened on the petitions that we had before versus what we have now on Kentucky?
We had an issue with the copy. We did receive those petitions along with some other emails in the last 24 hours within the period to get it to y'all. And there were some issues with copying, but you have the correct copies now with the petition attached.
Okay. Commission had time to review that. They know who's for and who's against it for the petition. Go ahead.
Commissioners, this is item number 5. It's a zone change request on Kentucky Avenue. The request is for a zone change from CN, or commercial neighborhood, to R6. Staff recommends approval. And the site is in the Nations neighborhood in West Nashville, in the West Nashville Community Plan area. The existing zoning is, again, CN, or commercial neighborhood. It's the least intense commercial zoning district in the zoning code. And this zoning does not permit residential development in this location along a local street. You can see in the zoning slide that the surrounding area is primarily zoned R6, which is the requested zoning district for this site. The zone change will be consistent with the surrounding, and the zone change to R6 will be consistent with that surrounding zoning district. The R6 would permit 2 dwellings on this site, either as an attached duplex or 2 detached single-family dwellings. The policy is T4, Urban Neighborhood Maintenance, and this is a residential policy. The existing CN zoning is not consistent with this policy, but the policy would support the proposed R6 zoning district. The community plan, the West Nashville Community Plan from 2009, points out that residential development is the most appropriate type of use at this site because the existing commercially zoned properties are underdeveloped and the site is within a relatively short distance of other policy areas that would permit commercial development, with the 51st Avenue corridor about 1/3 of a mile to the east and a node of neighborhood center policy about 4/10 of a mile to the west. To close, staff recommends approval of the R6 zoning district. Again, it is consistent with the residential intent of the T4 neighborhood maintenance policy, and R6 would also match the existing zoning in the surrounding Nations neighborhood. Thank you.
This item is open for public hearing. The applicant be allowed 10 minutes if they would like to come make a presentation.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Anthony Cherry. I'm a real estate agent and the proposed developer on the site. Prior to embarking on this endeavor, I did a lot of homework on it, and the first thing I did was just what Greg said. I looked at the neighborhood policy, and the neighborhood policy was in favor of redevelopment into rezoning, that is, into R6. Once on the property, you will notice that, if you apply sound commercial development, there's really nothing about the property which would be encouraging for any commercial development. The streets are incredibly narrow. There is no visibility. Truck traffic would be a hindrance to children. There's really no turnaround areas for the PFG Lester trucks or some of the larger trucks. I know the community one day would like to see a restaurant go in there, but these are the types of vehicles that will have to negotiate those streets. The traffic count that there's very little traffic. So to be a commercial developer and want to go into a spot like that, it would be a lot of money out of pocket with really, I don't know who would want to even go into the site. And something else, there's no good view there. Maybe if it was a water view or maybe if it was a downtown location view or skyline view, but so the point I'm making is, once I looked for a good sound commercial development idea, there wasn't any. And so it made more sense to look at what sound residential development ideas there were. And once you look at it from that direction, you find a lot of sound reasons why to put in 2 homes there. So if you look on the first page here, this is a picture of the lot. And right next to it is a little beer and cigarette place that does a high volume of business. And that's I believe a 3rd generation owner that's been there. They've been there for about 40-some years. It's called the H&H Market. On page 2, you see what would be next to the lot that I propose to build on. And I really believe it would do a lot for that corner. I think 2 beautiful homes next to that, next to the grocery store would really improve the neighborhood and add value to the other residential homes in the area. On page 3, you'll see the lot is under use right now, but it's called the campground, and it's where a lot of the local vagrants, I guess you'd call it, are just they have bonfires there and they just hang out and drink and whatever else they do there, and it's become a it's become a liability. This has been going on for a long time, and I went back to see who owned this property over the last 10 years, and I went back and I spoke with them. And the one person I happen to know, and his name's Henry Hood, I went and spoke with him. I said, "Hey, Henry, back when you owned that property, wasn't there a house on there?" He goes, "Yeah, there was." He says, "Every day, every other day, I was out there boarding it up, kicking people off of it. I had the roof was leaking, the door got kicked in." He said, "I couldn't get insurance. It was a liability problem." He said, "Finally, Hal Wilson came along, and he bought it, and he couldn't do anything with it. And eventually the house got burned down. The vagrants just, I don't know if they torched it or if they just were trying to keep warm in there one night." So the liability issue still persists, because if you could put yourself in an owner's situation, there's fights on this property regularly. And what really made us crack down on it just recently was there was a 14-year-old girl that walked by, and there were some things said to her that got around to the neighborhood, and it started scaring people. So we've put up signs, we've spoken to the police, and we have been trying to chase the people off of the property. Okay, so now the property's vacant from the campground, but there's still people walking through it. They still stop, from time to time, and it's still an eyesore. And if you just put yourself in a situation of an owner, it's hard. It's a dead property. It doesn't have value commercially. Even if you were to combine the whole CN, all three parcels together, you'd still have to buy a very viable business right there. You wouldn't just be buying an old H&H Market. You'd be buying his inventory. You'd be buying his cash flow, which is a huge dollar. And then there's the person on the other side. That's the woman's, that's her cash flow, the rental money she gets from that property. And she doesn't want to sell it because her son lives there. And she said, "If I sell it, he'll move back in the house with me." So there's some real reasons why this area is not going anywhere for a long time. So what I'm proposing is the next page. You'll see a site plan, and there's two beautiful homes looking to be built there. Richard Thanopoulos and I sat down and figured this out. The one home will be a 19-foot wide home. The other will be a 22.5-foot wide home. Okay? You'll see that in the green. And then the next page, these are the proposed homes to build on the site. This one here is believe it or not, it's a Craftsman style, but it's a more contemporary looking Craftsman style. It has great lines. It's beautiful. And when you look at that lot up there, I'd rather see this home there than the problems that occur on that lot. The second house, this is the 19-foot home, and this would be next to it, closer to the H&H Market. Now, once again, this is all based on what's best for that lot, since Metro Planning feels that there's already enough commercial districts there. 51st, Charlotte, Morrow Road, Centennial are all designated commercial areas. And I don't see them filling up real quick, especially 51st and also Centennial. I don't see them filling up very quickly with a lot of commercial tenants. So to be opposing this, that means it's going to sit for so much longer, because it'll take somebody with either a whole lot of stupidity or maybe a whole lot of money and not a lot of brains to come in there and spend it, because I don't know who would ever come in and rent it. And then when they build, who knows what'll go in there? And there's a lot of businesses I don't think the neighborhood would want to see in there. So I've been to 3 neighborhood meetings, and they're the second Tuesday of every month, and I've approached, and we've spoken, and I told them, what I was interested in doing, and there's a group of people there that just want to see this remain commercial. Now, they have their reasons, I guess, but under sound commercial development practices, they don't seem to be viable. So, I went out to the neighborhood and asked, what do you want? Because the majority of the neighborhood really doesn't come to the meetings. A lot of them are intimidated, and they're quiet. They have other things to do. They're really the silent majority of that neighborhood, and they said, well, if you need some support, we want to see houses there. We want to see some change there. We're tired of looking at the vagrants. We're tired of looking at, at a beat-up lot, and we'd like to see our part of the nations improve, just like the other side of 51st is improving. And we don't want to wait. We want to see the beauty now. So several people said that they would help me get signatures. So there was 4 different neighborhood residents, and once they got 100 signatures, they asked, should we get more? And I said, well, I don't think so. I don't think we need more than 100. So that's what's right here, and you all have 100 of those, those signatures. Now, they made a request that the neighborhood government did not see their names.
2 minutes up. You didn't save any for rebuttal. I'm sorry, but
thank you, commissioners.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak in support?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and commissioners. My name is Frank Parrish, and I live on Kentucky Avenue. I live about 3.5 blocks away. Now, that place that we're referring to has been an abomination to our neighborhood for years. Hoodlums hang out down there. They do dope. They drink beer. And H&H Market, they stay in business because they sell the beer, which that's what you're supposed to do when you're in business, is sell your product. However, as the gentleman before me said, we have commercial corridors in that neighborhood deemed to be that needy part of the neighborhood by your planning commission. We got Charlotte, we got 51st Avenue, we got Mara Road, and they got plenty of room to put businesses that are needed in that neighborhood. And I see that coming very slowly. And there's no reason to start using the streets, the residential streets for commercialism. It's just not necessary. There's plenty of room for development on the main corridors. And I'm totally in favor of houses over commercialism. And the other thing is, when you get a commercial business, they might be in business 2 years, 4 years, then they go out of business, then what do you put there? We don't have no control over that. It could be anything. Things that could cause more problems than we have now. So that's just my opinion. I've been there 48 years, and I've seen the ebb and flow of commercialism in that neighborhood. That's just the way I feel about it. Thank you for your time. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in support? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
First, I'd like to say I requested 5 minutes as president of the Neighborhood Association.
Right, we had a request from the Neighborhood Association president to speak on behalf of the nation's Neighborhood Association and the residents of the Neighborhood Association.
Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for your time this evening. First, I'd like to start with a point that Vice Chairman Clifton made earlier. Planning's about the future, not right now. I think that's a great point. As most of you know, we already have an issue in our neighborhood with density. Every time a house goes down in our neighborhood, we've got 2 that go up in its place due to the 25 by 150 lots that are grandfathered in underneath the 50 by 150 lots. With that being said, I don't see the need for Mr. Cherry to take a CN zoned parcel and put 2 houses on that when he can buy any parcel in our neighborhood and put 2 houses on that parcel. As a neighborhood, we're moving towards becoming a walkable neighborhood with core commercial neighborhood corridor on 51st Avenue North. And these CN pockets that are scattered throughout our neighborhood will be vital elements in the continued growth of our neighborhood. All of the most desirable urban neighborhoods in Nashville have walkable commercial pockets nestled in the residential streets, and our neighborhood should not have to lose this particular CN parcel at the expense of a real estate agent who wants to build 2 homes. I'm a realtor myself. I'm also a neighborhood leader for West Nashville. I serve on the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Committee. And as a leader in our neighborhood, I can tell you that I've got realtors and developers that call me every day, and they ask where they can put commercial pockets in our neighborhood. I would also like to point out that I asked Mr. Cherry numerous times to provide me with a copy of these signatures that he claims that he has. As of 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon, I spoke with Mr. Johnson, and he said that Mr. Cherry had still not provided planning with a copy of these signatures. I'd asked that these signatures be entered into public record. I personally do not believe that these signatures are valid homeowners in the nation's neighborhood. As far as using the idea of removing vagrants as a reason to rezone, I don't believe that at all. Removing vagrants is not a reason to rezone a parcel. In fact, the current property owner, Mr. Kinslow, should be held fully responsible for maintaining his property. And the police and code should also be involved to make sure that vagrants do not loiter on that property. This particular property is not the only property in our neighborhood that has a vagrant issue. We have vagrants throughout our neighborhood. It's a common issue, and it shouldn't be a reason to rezone a property. It should be a reason to get the police and codes involved and get it taken care of. I would also like to point out the neighborhood plan that was written in 2009 reads in these exact words: there's an area at Moore Road and Kentucky Avenue that contains vacant land, an office building, a small store, and a house that is zoned CS and CN. It is acceptable to retain these uses. I'd like to note that it plainly states in the neighborhood plan that it is acceptable to retain this use as a CN lot. It goes on to say the land uses and zoning should not be allowed to expand or intensify and should be rezoned to a district that more closely reflects the area's small scale. Well, I would argue here that the area's current small scale as a sole reason for recommending the rezone is not a valid argument. The neighborhood is scaling up with the rapid increase in housing quantity and density, and the small scale of 2009 is no longer relevant for our neighborhood. So, in my opinion, the sole reason to rezone this parcel is gone. If we could pull the map back up, I don't know if that's possible. I would also like to point out that we have CN parcels that are going to remain on both sides of this lot. My question would be, what happens if another store gets built on the right side of this property that Mr. Cherry would like to build 2 houses? I wouldn't be a happy homeowner if I lived in between 2 neighborhood market stores that are cigarette stores, as Mr. Cherry calls them. So, in closing, I would ask that you vote against this zone change request so the neighborhood can verify these signatures and further discuss our community plan with planning. At the very least, I would ask that this get deferred for further discussion. At some point, I feel like this has to become more about a neighborhood and what the neighborhood wants. We've had 3 meetings on this. The large majority of our meetings have been in disapproval of this rezoning. I'm moderator of our next door neighborhood site. We have over 300 members on our site. We've had 1 person on our neighborhood site that has spoken out in approval. Everyone else on our site that has commented on this has spoken out in disapproval of this rezoning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition?
Commissioners, my name is Michael Kenner. I have an interesting perspective on this because I am a real estate developer and I am also a resident. I live at 4603 Indiana. I think that if we can remember back to the days when there was a car wash on 12 South that was loaded with vagrants and people that did drugs and whatnot, that is now considered Urban Grub, which is one of our premier restaurants. There was another brick building in Maxwell Heights in East Nashville that was just used by vagrants in order to do drugs, and that's now Pharmacy Burger. I think that being of the new urbanism school of thought, I believe that having commercial nodes in our neighborhoods with walkability walkability is key to where Nashville wants to go. One of the three of the mayor's new initiatives for walkability, which is Walk Bike Nashville, Nash Vitality, and Nashville Next, which is headed up by our planning commission, all state that it is vital to have commercial nodes within our neighborhoods that create walkability and create a community aspect. And I'd like to close my argument just by stating the Congress for New Urbanism, which is one of the schools of thought that I think our planning department likes to follow. Their mission statement is, we will advocate the restructuring of public policy and development practices to support the following principles. Neighborhoods should be diverse in use and population. Communities should be designed with pedestrian and transit, as well as cities and towns. Should be shaped by physically defined and universally acceptable public spaces. Community institutions, urban places should be framed by architectural landscape that celebrates the history and climate of these building practices. If you look at the history of the nations, when we were originally platted in 1887, we were platted as all 25 wide lots and sold off in 2 lot parcels, which means there are over close to 1,000 residential lots in this neighborhood. I personally developed over 20 of them, and I just started developing this neighborhood a year ago. I find lots on a daily basis that are zoned residential that I can develop by right. To rezone this would be a disservice to future residents. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
Hi, my name is Mike Calhoun. I'm a resident of the Nations. I live at 5412 Michigan Avenue. You can probably see my house, actually right there in that photo, the next street up, which is suspicious because I've never been approached in favor of rezoning. I've never had anyone talk to me about this. It was actually, to reiterate some of my neighbors, I was approached in opposition of it, and I agree. I think it should remain a commercial zone. Vice Chairman Clifton made the great point, to reiterate Jeremy, planning is about the future, not about right now. I think this proposed rezoning is proposed with an eye to the past and a sole consideration for the present, but I think there's little to no thought given to the future. I ask that you reject this proposed change and do not hinder or impede the rejuvenation that is occurring daily in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Frank Stabile. This is just a couple of things what Mr. Cherry said. First, the first thing on my mind is H&H and Frank Parrish has said the same thing. H&H is a magnet for trouble, and I think there should be my letter and a petition that states that the idea is that the hope that this will be redeveloped and the redevelopment will get rid of H&H. As far as traffic that Mr. Cherry mentioned, I see the beer trucks come down that street every day. So if he's talking about a restaurant bringing trucks, those trucks are already in the neighborhood. So that's a moot point. What I just wanted to point out quickly with this community plan, which Jeremy mentioned, that is not in step with where the neighborhood is going because we're upscaling all these if you consider every house potentially turning into 2 houses and it's happening at a breakneck speed, then I highlighted a few things put in italics a few things as saying current small scale, which I don't think is still relevant. So there's some things in red there that you can read, and this also points out at the end to sort of try to push mixed use to 51st, but our community plan, as you'll see there, if you flip over, I highlighted it, this community plan from 2009 states that they don't think that's going to happen on 51st and that it's going to stay automobiles, auto body shops, and that kind of thing. So, that was 2009, not saying that, not trying to point a finger at planning, but I'm trying to point out that this is not in step with where we are now. So to cite this as a reason to rezone, I think is wrong, and we should, at the very least, defer and try to get this in step with where we are. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, is a motion to close the public hearing? Motion second, close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councilman Claiborne, this is your last item, and I'll let you start off with
No question.
Okay. It's your last chance. Phil?
I have a technical question.
With this, it was pointed out the fact that the lots on either side would remain CN. Doesn't this, in essence, create spot zoning?
Spot zoning is, I think in the case we made in the past, is that this zoning district would meet the community plan policies, would meet the residential policy of the community plan, and would meet other parts of the community plan. And because of that, it wouldn't be considered a spot zone.
All right, I'm getting a yes from the legal aspect of it. Okay, that's my only question. Judy?
I wasn't concerned about spot zoning, but I was concerned about having CN on either side of a residence. So let me ask you, what is on that CS parcel there, number 326? What's there now?
That's vacant.
And can you put the picture back up that shows the store, the market? So is the market oriented toward these houses?
It's oriented toward Kentucky.
It's oriented.
The front door is facing Kentucky.
Oh, okay. So you go in through off of Kentucky there, and So I'm just concerned about having CN on each side, and if it was 307, be a nice transition. So I'm assuming that at some point that other lot is going to come back in requesting to be rezoned also. I had another question. And where is the closest CN besides this lot here? Where's the next CN zoning?
I know of the surrounding CS zoning. I don't know if there's another. I can't think of where the next closest CN zoning is, but CS would allow for the same commercial uses that CN would permit. And you have CS zoning up and down 51st Avenue to the east, and then to the northwest as well.
Okay. So when one of the persons were up and they were talking about, redeveloping this into a nice neighborhood that had, some commercial appeal that a little restaurant where you could sit outside, a coffee shop, those kinds of things, in the neighborhood. That's not a vision for this neighborhood from staff?
That is, but I think the third of a mile or the 4/10 of a mile would still be considered a walkable distance to those types of services.
Because they're on, I haven't been out, I think I was just over on Alabama.
You have the 51st Avenue corridor, which has CS zoning, which allows for neighborhood type of uses like restaurants and retail, which generally command the higher rents. And you have also this node up here, which already has, I think, a market, and I can't remember what the other uses were, but certainly that building in this area could permit some neighborhood scaled or neighborhood compatible uses, and these are distances that aren't far away from the rest of the residential neighborhood.
So developing this as residential with CN on each side is something that we envision would be
again, I wanted to point out that the R6 meets the intent of the community plan policy, and it's the CN zoning that is not compatible with that with the residential policy.
Okay.
And again, CN is a commercial neighborhood zoning, and the intent of that is to permit uses and building sizes that are compatible to the residential scale. They're limited. Commercial businesses on CN zoning are limited to a maximum size for retail and restaurant, and also the FAR is the smallest FAR of all of the commercial zoning districts. And I can go to that table as well. Here's a table showing commercial and mixed-use zoning districts, and you can see the commercial neighborhood has the smallest FAR and will have the smallest permitted square footage of development. And so the intent of CN is to have commercial development that is compatible with residential neighborhoods. So there might not be that much of an issue of having a residential lot in the middle of two.
So with lighting and traffic, that wouldn't. Okay, thank you.
The neighborhood president mentioned the community plans states that it would be acceptable for this corner to remain as commercial. Could you give us that specific information? Or I guess I'm curious if the community, specifically when we went through the community plan process, did the community feel like eliminating these commercial areas was important, and is that why this policy was put in place? Or is this sort of an small exception within the bigger rule? Help us understand.
And I think one thing that Mr. Jeter pointed out was that and I can read it. I can read this to you if you'd like. But I think the intent was that the commercial could remain, or the small scale development could remain, but the intent wasn't for it to intensify or enlarge. And you can see, and that's kind of why I brought up this table, you can see that the CN zoning district is the lowest intensity commercial zoning district that's permitted in the zoning code right now. And any zone change to a different commercial zoning district or mixed use district that would permit a residential building type would allow for an intensification of commercial uses as well.
So the current zoning is not contrary to the plan, then, is that correct?
You're right. That's probably a good point.
Okay. So I think that's important for the commission to understand that while the proposed policy is consistent with, or the proposed zone change is consistent with the plan, the current zoning is not inconsistent with the plan. Okay. Thank you.
Stuart? You know, I realize I live in an unusual part of town, but we have a lot of mixed use, and we have restaurants, and we have mid-block commercial areas that are bounded by residential. We have commercial bounded by residential on both sides, residential in the middle. You know, it works, and I think the people opposing this have made some good arguments that I had not thought of, and it's a very credible position. There is, however, in my mind, no reason not to support the rezoning, because it doesn't have to be all block by block. We've seen examples everywhere where there's some, within a block, you have a different zoning type. And especially where there's existing zoning that you don't want to force people to convert. Clearly, the residential zoning is the norm for the area, and while we didn't want to force a new zoning the last time we looked at it, I think this one lot is a very reasonable thing given the experience of the owner, given the experience of the neighborhood, and the proximity to other residential. It's not like this is a desert where there are no commercial outlets anywhere. So I think I'm supporting this rezoning.
Jeff?
No comments.
Derek?
No comments.
No comments. Andre?
I feel like, what I had written down in my notes was that CN is consistent with the policy, and that is an item to consider. I kind of looked up what CN allows, and there are a number of by just permitted things that by their use fit into a neighborhood, and there are some that are permitted with conditions that expand it slightly but still fit within a neighborhood. And given the restriction on the square footage, it fits within a neighborhood. I was trying to scan around in my mind of places in the city where there are little businesses that are inside a neighborhood that are very popular. I thought of Sweet 16 over in East Nashville. I thought of a thing that the Planning Commission approved a while back, way deep in a neighborhood on Twist 10th South. It was a little building that had originally had a market, and that got approved to be used as commercial. And so there are examples where we've allowed it, and it eventually, thrives. So it seems like it's something that we're not going to add. We're not going to come back one day and say, well, this other corner over here ought to be CN. So it does seem like to downzone it might not be very visionary at this point. So I'm reluctant to downzone when we don't really have to. I don't think that I see the timing issues. I see the trepidation of the area and the awkwardness of a site that has created a lot of difficulties for people. But I'm concerned that we're losing sight of what might in the future be a precious zoning. It's a very difficult decision, and I'm torn.
Could I ask another question?
Yes.
How many years ago was there a commercial use on this particular piece of property? Because I know there was a comment about there was a house there. Has it been many years ago?
I don't know of a time when there was a commercial use on this property.
Well, in actuality, then, it has been used as a residential piece of property other than being vacant, as far as we know. So I don't know that we're really, in actuality, changing the actual use of it.
That actually made one question I had to counter my own argument. I thought I read in here that residential is permitted with conditions in CN.
It is, but one of those conditions is that you have to be along a collector or arterial street. The property has to be, and this one's along a local street. So in this case, the CN wouldn't allow.
So it wouldn't allow residential? Because I was thinking if you could do residential now and then let it be commercial one day if it happened, that'd be okay too. But it's not allowed because it's not an arterial.
Stuart? Good Stuart and then Hunter.
Oh, I know.
Okay, Hunter.
I think one thing to consider, too, and this is a difficult one, I'm not sure there's a wrong answer necessarily in this case, but the future redevelopment of the market site becomes much more challenging without the adjacent properties in it. I get back to the parking challenges that we're seeing throughout all of these small neighborhood centers and losing the ability to park. If we zone it residential, commercial uses will not be able to use these parcels for parking. Is that correct? If it changed hands, or they would have to rezone it back.
They would have to rezone it back
to a commercial use to park it. So there may be good reason, again, looking way out, to keep these 3 parcels that are currently zoned commercial. You know, the redevelopment of the 2 parcels next to them, next to this one, are going to be more challenging if this one's residential. That's one thing to consider.
Phil Potter, do you want to speak again? Okay. Need a motion.
I make a motion that we approve as staff recommended.
Motion second to approve the staff recommendations. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, let me see a show of hands. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. We are now ready for Councilman Claiborne. You have one more chance to speak. Any word from the council that we need to be aware of?
I've really enjoyed the last 2 years. This has been a great learning experience, and that's one of the reasons that I decided finally not to seek the second 2-year term, because I feel like that there are other people in the council that would benefit from having this experience, and that seeking it simply because I've enjoyed it is kind of a selfish thing, and so I decided to step aside and let somebody else do it. So, but I appreciate being here with all of you. It's been thought challenging, I guess is a good way to say it. I haven't always agreed with everybody, but I think that as a commission, we've done a good job. We've handled some very difficult situations, and but I think overall that this body does an exceptional job. I think we're 500 square miles as a city, and what's good for one area is not always good for another area. And so, as I've said several times in my comments, what is good planning practice is not always good practice for the community. And so I would just hope that you keep that in your mind as you make decisions in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to have you and to get to know you, so we'll look forward to other times. Councilman, or Ponder, do you have anything from the Parks Board?
Next meeting will be the day after Labor Day, be on Tuesday at noon at the Parks Department, and there's one subject that's coming up, by the way, that's going to be very interesting, and that is the proposal for a cell tower in Percy Warner Park.
Yeah, I did earlier, but I'll do it in Hunter, anything from the start?
I just thought I'd mention, and Ms. Jones could attest to this, yesterday at Historic Zoning Commission, we were challenged with an issue that I think could ultimately come before us, and that is there's some discrepancy between the historic district outbuilding regulations, design guidelines, and the definition. It basically comes down to the definitions of an outbuilding, a detached dwelling unit, and an addition to an existing building. And we really struggled with, and it wasn't very clear. And I'm hoping that we can ultimately get some clarity to that, which probably means a change to the ordinance at some point. So, also, hopefully, Rick, I'm sure you're going to mention Joe Minicozy being here next week. Thanks.
Recognized Councilman Hunt earlier and welcome aboard. Now, next meeting be official for you to speak up and vote, and look forward to next 2 years with you. So welcome aboard. Rick?
Yeah, just several things. I want to congratulate Carrie Logan on passing AICP. We want to do that. Just like you let the councilman speak last, we let Greg Johnson present his case here on his. This will be the last Planning Commission meeting that Greg will be with us, and we wish him well and thank him very much for his contribution to the department. But we wanted to make sure that he didn't go out on a low note here, that he did get to present a case here at the and a controversial one at that.
Where's he going? Do we know? He didn't tell us.
Where are you going, Greg?
Also, just to take note, the bond memo in your packet today will be the last bond memo that you'll be receiving from us, because we don't have any more cases to present to you. So,
wow.
Oh, Bob says probably. So,
no problem cases.
Oh, no problem cases.
problem.
That's right. That's great.
Okay.
I want to mention GIS. They've been actively working on the flooding of August 8th, but I don't know that anybody's made this report. But the flooding of August 8th, just a couple of weeks ago, we had 307 homes that were affected, and 120 of those homes had major damage. We had 45 businesses that were affected, and 30 of those had major damage or destroyed. So it didn't get a lot of coverage other than if you were there, but if you were there, there was an awful lot of damage there. With regard to Nashville Next, the Kurdish video is up. If you'll want to see that, it's not up. Oh, it'll be up tomorrow. Okay, sorry, Craig. We do have several activities over the next couple of weeks. Today we're speaking to the First Baptist Seniors Group, and we also spoke to MTA today. We did that. Next Tuesday we have the Tennessee Christian Chamber of Commerce. Next Saturday, we have the Dragon Boat Festival and the Buffalo Festival. And then the September 10th, we're at the State Fair Senior Day. As Hunter mentioned, the big activity is Joe Minicozy's speech next week, presentation next week. We have scheduled a luncheon with the council members and the Planning Commission members. It'll be next Monday at noon at this location. I know several of you have signed up. And Kelly will be calling to make sure that the rest of you sign up. She'll be calling and checking with you. His presentation is extremely important. We have two remaining ones that we know of, this one and probably one in November, that are especially important to the commission and the council because they deal with they deal with finances and the implication of different development patterns. And there's not a right or a wrong, but I think it's really important to understand how the property tax system reflects different development patterns and how they contribute to the city's budget. With half of the city's budget coming from property taxes, it's important to them. He has really done an analysis of that and can point out kind of what areas are tax generators and which ones, do you provide the services to without the equivalent amount of taxes. And so we're Monday at 12 o'clock right here. We will have lunch for you, but you have to tell Kelly what to order for you. It's important. And if you can't be here, he's also presenting Monday night at 6 o'clock at Hambry Auditorium at Scarrett Bennett. That'll be to the public. He's also presenting Tuesday morning at ULI, but that's a sold-out event. And he has one other presentation Tuesday afternoon. He's presenting to the Mayor's Caucus and the regional leaders and there. But we've tried to schedule it easy for the commission to meet at one of those times, but it's an enjoyable presentation. He's just a good presenter, but it's also extremely informative in terms of things that you don't think about. I mean, things that when you begin to analyze different properties on the same scale, they make a big difference in terms of what they're generating. And you might be surprised that Walmart isn't a very big tax generator. So
will that be videotaped?
We will videotape that. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it is, but one of them we are.
The presentation Scarrett Bennett will be taken.
Yeah, but I would encourage you to be there because you may have some questions of them. So,
Rick, how many?
Pardon?
Excuse me. How many homes you said was affected? I got to get a report on that. That's a good piece.
307 homes were affected. 120 had major damage or were destroyed.
A lot of those are in your council district, weren't they? Councilman?
Yeah,
they were there.
I got 19 in my district.
Yeah, there was a lot of in, I think, Pardue.
And I got another meeting coming up, and I'm going to use those numbers so they can see how well it's spread, because the biggest question you get is those kind of issues is people want to know.
FEMA is in town. I didn't mention it. FEMA is now in town and assisting those in obtaining loans. And
they were in my district. I met some of them.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Any other comments? Stand adjourned.